Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will be getting started in a minute or two. We just want to give a couple people another couple minutes to join. I still see the number of participants going up. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started for today. Thank you so much for joining the Texas Home Learning 3.0 Product Specific Adoption K-5 Science webinar. My name is Kristen Hull. I'm the Associate Commissioner of Instructional Strategy, and we also have with us Melissa Lautenschlager, who's the Director of Instructional Materials and Implementation. We are both supporting the implementation of Texas Home Learning, and so I will talk you through portions of this webinar today, and Melissa will also be covering some portions related to the K-5 Science product. So before we get started, just want to highlight that as you are listening and as you have questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the call, and we will answer questions as we can, either through the webinar and during the webinar or at the end. For the questions that we can't answer, we will be continuously populating an FAQ document that we will continuously update and publish on the Texas Home Learning site. So if we don't answer your question, we will be working on getting an answer as soon as we can. We will also be posting a recording of this webinar on our website. So if for some reason you miss a portion or you have a colleague who wants to listen, you'll be able to access the recording as well. To get us started, I want to just quickly ground us in where we are with the implementation webinar series workshops. So we have the Adopt Remote Curriculum webinar series that provides some generic curriculum agnostic guidance on how to think about whether you should adapt existing products or think about adopting new products. And then what we're also doing is launching the product-specific adoption webinars, and that's where we are today. The goal here is to really give districts an overview of each of the products in a particular subject area and grade band so that they have more information when thinking about whether that product is something that their district may want to use based on their local context. In addition, we'll be providing a series of ongoing trainings to think about how we can support districts once they actually do decide to adopt, and helping them get their teachers, their instructional coaches, and principals and district leaders up to speed on how to get started, as well as some additional webinars on technology supports should a district choose to implement a particular product with Schoology and or another LMS. So that is all what is coming, but today we're here focused on the product-specific adoption webinar for the K-5 Science product. On the next slide, just on the high level, we'll be introducing the K-5 Science product. We'll be able to explore some features of that product and how it supports remote learning. We'll talk about some implementation supports for Texas Home Learning 3.0 Science product, and then just share where you can access some sample materials. Just to reframe, and for those of you who haven't been as involved in some of the Texas Home Learning webinars, just want to quickly give a high-level overview of what Texas Home Learning is. It is an optional aligned suite of resources that educators can fully or in part use in a remote learning environment. So as you can see in this image, there's really three components of Texas Home Learning. There's instructional materials, technology, and professional development. For technology, we will be focusing mostly on the instructional materials portion of today's webinar, where we'll really dive into the science product for the K-5 grade band. So prior to getting started, I really want to ground this conversation in why instructional materials matter and why we are focusing so much on this as a part of the Texas Home Learning solution. So a growing body of research has shown that student achievement increases when students are provided with high quality instructional materials that offer a number of different things. So that provide consistent opportunities for students to work on assignments that align to grade level standards, that support strong instruction to ensure students are deeply engaged with what they're learning, to help teachers meaningfully differentiate for all students, and finally to help teachers set high expectation for all students, including those students with unfinished learning, so that they can meet grade level standards. So really want to ground in this now, just given that research does show that getting high quality instructional materials really can matter for our ultimate goal around student achievement. We also want to quickly remind folks that the Texas Home Learning resources are created specifically for this context with COVID and remote learning. So all of the materials that we are creating and offering through Texas Home Learning will be adapted so that they can be taught in remote learning environments. We also just want to highlight what's available through Texas Home Learning for the instructional materials portion of the offering. So here on the left, you'll see all of the subject areas and grade bands where we're offering instructional materials. And then on the right, what you'll see is the list of criteria that we look for whenever we were identifying a Texas Home Learning 3.0 solution. So for each of the subjects and grade bands, they'll have to meet all the criteria on the right for them to be a Texas Home Learning product. And we'll cover that in a little bit more in detail in this webinar. So again, highlighting that today we're focusing on the Science K-5 product. One second. Sorry, I'm switching screens for myself real quick. So on the next slide, we now want to actually introduce you to the Texas Home Learning K-5 Science product, which we're really excited about. We're excited to announce that this product is the PhD Science TEKS Edition, and we're glad to be able to share that the K-5 Science product, we'll share a little bit more about that today, look at some sample teacher materials and student materials, and provide information on when you can begin accessing the first set of materials. The PhD Science TEKS Edition is a product that comes from the Great Minds team. So the PhD Science TEKS Edition is a knowledge building curriculum that is engaging for all students. So the curriculum integrates scientific investigation and reasoning with grade level TEKS to aid students in understanding core science concepts through the exploration of authentic phenomenons. The curriculum inspires students to wonder about the world and empowers them to make sense of it. Also, when thinking about the design of the curriculum, we want to note that math, history, English language arts, all of those subjects have connections that are featured in the modules. In addition to notes that indicate where students can practice or expand their skills in those areas. The curriculum features high quality, grade appropriate text in each module that provides an opportunity for students to practice reading skills. A study of selected works of art provide another way for students to access the science. So the PhD Science Core product with its companion product for continuous learning, which is called InSync, those in combination provide a comprehensive curriculum, so there's not a need to find additional supplementary resources when thinking about implementing that curriculum. So students and teachers use the core product when in class, and then they can seamlessly transition to home or remote learning out of the classroom through the InSync product. We also want to highlight that the goal is to inspire students to wonder about the world and empower them to make sense of it through the student-driven curriculum. So teachers facilitate learning, but the goal through this curricular product is that students are able to own it. Students are driving the learning so they can find answers to the questions about the world around them. It's an exploratory approach to teaching and learning, and when implemented effectively, we'll have students that develop problem solving and critical thinking skills that go beyond passing a test for a single science lesson. So what does that look like in PhD Science TEKS Edition? The PhD Science TEKS Edition is a phenomenon-based curriculum. So in each module, students will ask questions as they investigate authentic phenomenon and use that to understand core science concepts. And the phenomenon they'll be investigating are real. So we want them to have experiences that are real with it. So in every module, a student will be able to gather evidence, develop models, and construct scientific explanations for why the world works the way that it does. And I want to quickly go back to grounding in these 6 criteria that are part of all products that will be included in the Texas Home Learning 3.0. So again, for the PhD Science TEKS Edition, it will include daily teacher lesson plans, student materials, module assignments, and guidance for remote learning. In addition, it will include videos of all lessons that can be accessed in the home environment to really give teachers and students family support. The materials will be available both in digital and print formats. There will be accessibility for all learners, including all materials in Spanish, as well as supports to understand and respond to individual student learning. There will be opportunities for formative and summative assessments throughout each module, and we'll touch a bit more later on the types of different formative and summative assessment opportunities that are included. And this really also allows students to apply their new learning to a phenomenon. Lastly, there's checks for understanding, science logbook, and science journals that provide points to monitor student progress as well. As we launch these webinars, we do know there are a number of frequently asked questions that are at the top of mind for districts. So just want to get to highlight some of those immediately before we go in a bit more into the science materials themselves. So first off, we get the question, does PhD Science TEKS Edition align to the TEKS resource system? And I really want to highlight here that THL and TEKS resource system are 2 distinct and separate curricular products, and they include 2 separate scope and sequences. So because of that, the THL product has its own scope and sequence that's strategically designed and unique to the THL materials. And so those products, that scope and sequence is not aligned to the TEKS resource system scope and sequence. However, I do want to just make sure we're clear here. Both the scope and sequences that are part of the PhD science product and the TEKS resource system, both of those are TEKS aligned curriculum. They are just different in that they're different products. So because of this, it is recommended that you do not mix and match the Texas Home Learning lessons to the TEKS resource system scope and sequence. So that's not recommended, and that is because lessons within the PhD science product are intentionally designed to build on each other, and they're designed in a particular order related to the scope and sequence that's a part of that program. One other thing we want to highlight is that THL and TRS are still 2 distinct products. And one of the things we want to highlight is that because the THL product includes a number of additional things like daily teacher materials, which are lesson plans, as well as student materials that go with the teacher lesson plans, the print and digital versions, the family materials, the supports for all learners, the progress monitoring tools, and the remote instruction guides. Because it includes all of that, we just do want to highlight that those things go in combination with the year at a glance documents and the unit overview documents that are designed as part of the THL product. So when a district is thinking about for a particular subject area and grade band, which one to adopt, one of the things we do recommend doing is just looking at whether the ability to access all of the resources that are provided with THL does benefit a district in thinking about the fact that they would have to use those in alignment with the THL scope and sequence that's recommended. We also want to quickly highlight the question around whether schools and districts need Schoology to use the PhD Science TEKS Edition. And the answer is no. Districts will be able to access the PhD Science TEKS Edition resource in a variety of different ways. They'll be able to access it on the vendor's website. They will, if they do choose to adopt Schoology, they can access it through their district Schoology instance. And they will also be able to access LTI code that would allow them to integrate the resources into a different LMS if they choose not to adopt Schoology. So again, 3 different pathways to access the materials, and each of these pathways may be better suited for different districts based on their local context. Schoology will provide features that will enhance the use of the product for teachers and students. And so we will be planning to provide additional information about how Schoology can provide those enhancements, but you do not necessarily need an LMS to access the resources that we're going to cover in today's webinar. Those will still be available on the vendor's website. As we go through, for districts that are still interested in adopting Schoology, we just want to highlight how you can do that. So you can go to powerschool.com/Texas to learn more and to sign up today. Over 300 districts have already signed up, and we have another 180 plus on the way. And so, we do see this as being an option to provide a great solution for learning management systems in the remote setting. And lastly, we do get the question on when are materials going to be available. So the next release date for the Module 1 Science materials for the PhD Science TEKS Edition product will be September 18th. And then we will be posting the future release dates for the additional modules beyond Module 1 on the texasHomeLearning.org website. As another quick reminder, part of the reason that we are releasing materials in waves or in quote unquote packages is that materials are being adapted for the current context to support remote learning. And so as materials are being adapted, they're going through an extensive review where we have teams of teachers reviewing them, and we're checking for TEKS alignment. We're checking to make sure that materials do support remote learning. And as those materials are approved through that review process, we then release them. So that is why materials are being released in waves, and that is why you'll be able to see Module 1 materials coming up on September 18th. So I'm going to pause there briefly to look at a couple questions. And then we'll turn it over to Melissa, who's going to share a bit more about the PhD Science TEKS Edition curriculum. But really quickly, just going to pause to see if I can answer questions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melissa. We'll be working on getting some of these questions answered and think through how we can answer them as a part of the webinar.
Thanks, Kristen. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at the PhD Science TEKS Edition curriculum and aligned supports. As we do this, I'm going to highlight how the curriculum is built to support a variety of school models in remote learning so that you can consider how it could support your specific local context. Starting with a full set of teacher and student materials, teachers will have what they need to provide high quality science instruction regardless of the student's learning environment. So every grade level with the PhD Science TEKS Edition has several modules covering phenomena in organisms and environment, earth and space, force, motion and energy, as well as matter and energy. So each module is broken down into a coherent sequence of concepts, a science engineering challenge, as well as an end of module assessment. Each concept contains a series of lesson sets that allow students to rigorously engage with coherently linked sub-phenomena questions related to the overarching essential question and anchoring phenomena of the module. Teachers will have access to modules and lesson sets that align to TEKS and address unfinished learning. There are some overlaps in the modules across grade levels. For example, you may see a similar module in grades 4 and 5. This is deliberate because the TEKS are grade banded in science on the STAR assessment, and students in 5th grade are assessed on some 4th and 3rd grade TEKS. In the first year of using PhD Science TEKS Edition, it's recommended that the overlap happens to ensure that students have experiences they need to master standards before being assessed in 5th grade. There is some flexibility in moving modules around, but not lessons within the module. Because the curriculum is being developed specifically for Texas, Great Minds is developing at the module level, and therefore the skills and content progress within a module. The aspect of the curriculum provides an opportunity for districts to actually try out the curriculum in year 1 and compare to current practices before adopting completely. The program structure of PhD Science TEKS Edition is the lessons are typically 35 to 45 minutes long. This varies a little bit in K2, where lessons are a little bit shorter. Each module consists of about 25 to 30 lessons over the course of the year. Teachers will cover various modules worth of content. While the lessons are timed to be 45 minutes, you can make some adaptations to the lessons for flexibility that you need for your school model and current learning environments. So some materials that are going to be available today, and I'm going to take you to that website in just a second, is the module overview, end of module assessment, lesson 1 teacher edition, student facing daily videos, learn anywhere plans, a student journal activity guide. In addition, some other supporting documents, including some pacing guides, will be going up. So I'm going to quickly jump over and show you the website and how you can get there. So if you actually go to texasHomeLearning.org, I'm going to go all the way. So sorry for a minute, you're seeing my texasHomeLearning.org and scroll down to instructional materials. You're able to get into the science materials. And so there are product details. If I go to grade K-5 for science, I'm actually able to go into the PhD science materials. There gives you an overview of this program, and then you are able to get into the materials by scrolling down to teacher and parent guardian. So I'm going to encourage you to go to the site a little bit later and be able to look at the curriculum here. And so I can go, I'm going to take a look at kindergarten. As you can see on my screen, there are some additional getting started, some safety considerations, contract and quiz. And then I can jump into module 1, which is about weather and really being a scientist. One exciting part about this curricula and instructional materials is it really focuses on students thinking and acting like scientists. As I go into the materials, one thing that is exciting and a great start is the module overview. In the module overview, you're going to notice that each module starts with an essential question and begins to develop this focus on a phenomena. Within the module overview, you're going to notice that there is a scope of the sequence of lessons and helps to understand how and what students will be learning over the course of the module. And then the module map gives a breakdown of each lesson and the associated TEKS, as well as the ELPs that go along and the phenomenon question. So we can go through the map here, and it gives you a breakdown of the concepts and the lesson sequences that are associated. Within the focus standards, one highlight to notice is that the TEKS here are identifying specifically how far will students progress in their understanding of a standard by the end of the module. And that's bolded here so that you understand exactly what students will be learning before the end. Also, there's a building content knowledge to support both teachers and leaders in understanding what students will be learning throughout the course of this module to go deeper into the science behind it, so that there can be discussions even within PLCs as you're beginning to prepare for lessons. Key terms, and then advanced materials preparation, and always safety because it is science. Other components that are really exciting to see here is that you would be able to look at the lesson sets. I'm going to get to that in here, where you can go down to an actual individual lesson. In the lesson, you can see the daily video. You're able to see within here the teacher resources. Starting with the prepare helps teachers to understand what the lessons that go together and what students will be learning, how far they'll progress with the standards, and associated materials that are helpful in preparation. So then once you've done that, you can jump right into the lesson with the teacher guide through the prepare and the TE. You'll notice that on the teacher edition of the lesson, there is an agenda. This is for really focused on in-class instruction. I'm going to talk about how remote learning plans are built in just a moment. But there are some additional supports for teachers as notes, things to notice about students, some guiding questions to help support entry points for students, as well as recommendations to support English language development and other associated concepts to support teachers in making cross-curricular notices for students. Then you would progress through the teacher edition, giving all examples and pictures to help to support and where students should be. The land section of a lesson is really going to be that end of the particular lesson and making sure that students understood the concepts for the day. Going back in here, for some students, there also will be some additional, or some lessons, there'll be additional resources. In this case, can be some photographs and even a tent building setup for this particular development of a shelter that could be sent home or emailed to teachers or students to be able to use. I'm going to switch back over. You can continue to explore this site. You'll see that the end of an assessment is there, and the projected, which I'll talk about in just a moment. I'm going to come back to my slides and share with you a little bit more about the components. You can see that in some lessons, students would have logbook pages in which those could be printed, and then once InSync is available, these are actually fillable PDFs that students would be able to complete digitally. Additionally, in the program, one things to note is that there is the incorporation of fine arts and trade texts. And so there are often opportunities within lessons to reference famous pictures or art representations. And then in modules, there may be an anchor text that students could read or teachers could read to students, especially in kindergarten. The assessment opportunities, I just want to talk through what does formative and summative assessments look like in PhD science. So throughout, there are checks for understandings. That includes evaluation guidance on what evidence to look for and next steps for remediation. And this occurs at least once per lesson, so teachers can modify instruction as needed. Additionally, each module has 2 to 4 conceptual checkpoints, also with evaluation guidance, that occur at the end of each concept to assess a student's mastery of skills identified in each concept's standards. There is an engineering or science challenge in each module that allows students the opportunity to apply their knowledge to solve problems, which includes an evaluation rubric. And an end of module assessment also includes a rubric that gives students an opportunity to apply the knowledge they've developed over the course of the module in new context as they explain how it applies to related phenomena. What we're going to take a look at are, what does this actually look like? So here's an example of a check for understanding. And you can see that there is some guidance on evidence and next step recommendations for teachers based on student responses. We have a science and engineering challenge in which students are really involving themselves in the practice of science. So based on a problem in the natural world, students will describe, plan, implement, and improve a project while communicating and sharing solutions with their peers. And then the end of a module assessment, you can see that there is a strong incorporation of use of skills while applying the concepts. And so here, students would evaluate some data and be able to use evidence to explain their understanding of the concept. I'm going to quickly take a look at, before I progress into the remote learning and in sync, I'm going to quickly take a look to see if there are some, I think I'll answer a lot of these questions, but just taking a quick look at the chat. I will offer an opportunity at the end to talk a little bit more about some of the questions that you're answering. So, or you're asking, excuse me. So looking at the in sync, which is really to support remote learning, I want to talk through a few things. So the following beliefs drove the design of the PhD Science in Sync. It's that all students at all times need access to high quality instruction on new content. And so the teacher facilitated peer-to-peer discourse is vital. Capturing daily hand-drawn work in writing is important. And assessment should include a one-on-one discussion-based element to properly measure student progress. So the PhD Science in Sync provides flexible tools and resources beyond the teacher and student curriculum files. These tools support continuous high quality instruction, whether schools operate in person, virtually, or through some combination of both. The product is designed to complement, not replace, the knowledge building resources in the full PhD Science TEKS Edition curriculum. At the heart of PhD Science in Sync are new tools designed to enhance delivery of science lessons across various configurations of in-person and virtual instruction. We'll talk about the Learn Anywhere plans, the lesson videos, science journals, and PhD Projected. PhD Science in Sync helps educators meet their current moment by providing additional supports for continuous learning, whether it be in the classroom or at home. The Learn Anywhere plan is the first part I want to talk about. This is a continuous learning plan with module level and lesson level recommendations for a full year of instruction, with recommendations for flexible use in various contexts. It's going to support teachers to quickly transition from in-person or hybrid instruction to fully virtual if necessary. Lesson level plans provide recommendations around the daily lesson video and teacher facilitated instruction. They also increase ease of lesson preparation for educators, especially when in-person instruction is not possible. And they promote teaching with fidelity and rigor in a variety of scenarios. So you can see on this plan, there does provide some guidance of how you could do asynchronous, synchronous, what are the most important parts, as well as recommendations of what to send or direct families to. Additionally, there are teacher videos for asynchronous instruction. These are short videos that are intended to focus on the main concept development for each lesson. They're actually engaging and ask students questions and have them work simultaneously while watching these very short clips that are age appropriate timing to support the concept development. The journal contains activities and questions that focus on essential learning from the lesson for students to complete during or after daily videos, and each lesson has a fillable PDF. These will be available in Spanish and English so students can access. They can be filled in or they can be printed as PDFs. K2 Science does not include the full science journal, but often has areas for students to draw or write short answers as well. And then just another showing that for each one, there are teacher samples so that you can understand what and how students might reply to a specific answer. And then PhD Projected is a digital resource that provides teacher with slides to cover each module. It includes images referenced in the modules, videos, and other resources that the teacher has available in the teacher edition, but it's in a format teachers can easily project the content for the entire class to view or could use during synchronous class time. I'm going to just talk a little bit about adaptations for various school models and talk about a hybrid example. So for schools that are choosing to go hybrid, we're going to look a little closely at a possible student experience using PhD Science TEKS Edition. This is an example for a hybrid model in which students attend school 2 days per week and learn remotely for the remaining 3. This is only an example and by no means the only way to use PhD Science TEKS Edition. So in here, you're going to see that Carla attends school in person on Mondays and Tuesdays and receives instruction on the PhD Science lessons directly from her teacher in school, and then learns remotely Wednesday through Friday with synchronous instruction through her district's LMS on Wednesdays, and she learns asynchronously on Thursdays and Fridays. And another group, Jack, who's another student at the school, has the opposite schedule. So regardless of the type of school schedules, teachers are able to leverage the resource and recommendations within PhD Science and Sync to optimize knowledge building with students, whether in person or remote. Additionally, I want to walk through some supports for all learners. So like scientists, students must use multiple modalities to express their understanding and rely on discourse to develop their knowledge. So students take part in purposeful discussions in which they clarify, justify, and interpret their own ideas and respond to others' ideas to build understanding. Engaging students in learning begins with compelling phenomena that interest them. PhD Science features multifaceted phenomena that spark student curiosity about many aspects of one phenomenon. Students generate their own questions, work together to make sense of phenomena, and gather evidence to build scientific knowledge. Students must engage with different types of information to make sense of the phenomena. Narrative, explanatory, and quantitative information can all describe important aspects of phenomena and science ideas. Information can be represented through images, written and spoken words, symbols, videos, hands-on experiences, and many other means. Interaction with multiple representations allows all students to access complex phenomena. The Universal Design for Learning framework in PhD Science makes science learning accessible to all students by incorporating the 3 guiding principles of UDL framework. All PhD Science instructional sequences provide multiple means of engagement to motivate learning. representation and presenting information to students, and student action and expression to demonstrate what they know and can do. The principles of UDL make it possible for all students to achieve success in their understanding of TEKS. What you'll see here is that while lessons include versatile learning activities designed for all students, they also include in-the-moment differentiation supports that provide examples of how teachers may customize instruction to support specific learning needs. Many students may benefit from the differentiated supports. However, the supports focus on learners with needing that are performing above or below grade level and needing English language development. PhD Science encourages teachers to use their professional knowledge and best practice in order to support students with their unique needs. There are also intentional language supports included in PhD Science TEKS Edition. Provides teachers and students with the capacity to toggle between English and Spanish resources through the digital access. Daily lessons videos are recorded in both English and Spanish, as well as closed captioned, and the curriculum PDF files will be available in both English and Spanish, which are printable for both teachers and students. Many components of the product have already mentioned are going to support students and teachers and will help family members engage with the product as well, such as the language supports and the lesson videos. The parent tip sheets give a key concept overview and identify ways that parents can help at home. So there are additional supports for families to engage with their students and support learning at home. I'm going to pause for a moment and then I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to talk about implementation.
Great, thank you so much, Melissa. So we do want to talk a little bit more about implementation practices. We've touched on some of this a bit in this webinar, but we'll go into a little bit more detail. So what you'll see on this next slide is that, this graphic, sorry, Melissa, if you go to the next slide, the graphic actually just gives a high-level overview of a couple things that we want to highlight when thinking about high-fidelity implementation of a product. So the PhD Science TEKS Edition is a flexible science solution designed to support the unique scientific goals of each district. However, there are some features of the curriculum that are foundational to its effectiveness and must be followed in order to advance student learning in science. So these best practices highlighted in this visual are grounded in TEA's broader effective schools framework focused on supporting high-performing schools. The implementation practices highlighted here are also found in different levers within the effective schools framework. So in the visual above, the outer ring represents various district and school system structures and processes, and we really want to highlight that they're centered around the high fidelity use of the PhD Science TEKS Edition product. So these things should be integrated and aligned to support effective use of curriculum. Additionally, given the change required to successfully support usage of a new product, it is important to think through how you're going to support schools and teachers in investing in the upfront training and ongoing training specifically related to the PhD Science TEKS Edition product to ensure that they're going to be able to use it as intended. So if we go to the next slide, again, one of the things to highlight is, there are ways in which you can modify the use of Texas home learning curriculum to meet your needs in your local context and your specific school models. However, there are also features of the curriculum that are foundational to its effectiveness and therefore are not recommended to be changed. So one of the things just to highlight again is that you are able to move around some of the modules, but within modules, it is recommended that you do not reorder the lessons because they do build throughout the module to ensure particular topics are covered effectively. So although reordering of lessons in PhD Science TEKS Edition does not support student mastery of the TEKS, it still is recommended that teachers think about how to adapt lessons to meet the specific needs of their students in their local context. So as teachers internalize the PhD science lessons, they may find the need to add additional scaffolds for specific students, the ability to reteach all or part of a lesson that students did not understand, or the ability to utilize related phenomena to connect the students in the room. And then lastly, PhD Science TEKS Edition builds students' understanding of scientific concepts across topics and modules. The goal here is to think about focusing on mastery over a concept, not an individual lesson. So this reinforces knowledge building over the course of a module, allowing students to internalize activities, concepts, and terminology, and demonstrate knowledge gain by applying to an alternative context rather than rote memorization of a key science term. So we also want to think about just these, if we're looking at the left visual, the top two sections highlighted in blue. So effective curriculum implementation also requires that some district and/or school level system structures be put in place to support the curriculum. So for PhD science, the recommended schedule should allow for at least 35 minutes of daily science instruction in K2 and 45 minutes of daily science instruction in 3.5. In hybrid and remote school models, some of this time can be asynchronous time, and there'll be guidance around that in some of the supporting tools. In addition, using assessments included in the curriculum will ensure that teachers measure student progress against the learning they have done with the curriculum itself. So PhD science includes 4 types of assessments in every module: checks for understanding, which are formative assessments, 1 per lesson in grades 3-5 and 1 every few lessons in grades K2. They also include conceptual checkpoints, which are formative assessments, 1 at the end of each concept in K5. They include the science or engineering challenges that Melissa referenced, 1 per module in K5, and then the end of module assessment at the end of each module in K5. So we really want to highlight this just because it is recommended that you use the assessments integrated in the curriculum so that you actually get accurate understanding of student progression and learning. If you're using external assessments, there is the potential that you are assessing students against skills that have not yet been covered in the PhD Science TEKS Edition. So as we move forward and look at the bottom 2 components of this visual, effective curriculum implementation means that students are using the materials well to drive student achievement. So when thinking about this, the coaching and evaluation systems for teachers should reinforce high quality implementation of the curriculum itself. So integrated coaching should be curriculum specific and support teachers' use of the PhD science model as intended. So for example, PhD Science TEKS Edition includes formative assessment tools that often requires teachers the ability to evaluate student understanding through classroom or small group discussions. So when thinking about it from a coaching perspective, instead of coaching teachers on how to create formative assessments, we can think about coaching teachers on how to shift their focus on using a science discourse in the classroom or virtually to gauge student understanding, guide instructional decisions, and assist with pacing. So this will make the coaching of effective teaching practices more integrated with the PhD science curriculum itself and create a more coherent and effective experience for those teachers. Similarly, when supporting teachers in building content knowledge, it's important to align it to the modules and lessons of the PhD Science and TEKS Edition product. So for example, teachers are more prepared and successful in facilitating student learning when they have worked through the science prior to teaching the lesson. So professional development and PLCs may be structured in a way to encourage and support teachers working through the lesson, investigations, discussions ahead of time, so they can solidify their own content knowledge and become better prepared to identify places where they may need additional scaffolding to review and enhance their ability to adapt lessons for their students. And Melissa referenced some of this earlier, but there will be supports in the materials to help teachers think through the content knowledge they should be learning and be reviewing ahead of going through a particular lesson or module. We also want to highlight here that you may be considering transitioning to PhD science now or later in the year. And this question has actually come up a couple times in the chat. So I just want to highlight here, we do recognize the timing and of the release of these materials is not ideal for anyone, especially given that a number of schools have already started. So what we are planning to do to support districts in thinking about the transition is provide guidance around different entry points that a district and or classroom can take when thinking about transitioning to PhD Science TEKS Edition, should they choose that they want to do that. So for example, if you are a district that wants to transition at the end of your first 6 weeks, what could an adapted scope and sequence and pacing guide look like? Similarly, at the end of the second 6 weeks, at the end of the third 6 weeks, etc. So we'll be releasing information on how to think about those transition points throughout the year, should a district decide that the resources included in a particular product for THL help meet the needs of their teachers in their schools. Again, just like any year, teachers should also be ready to scaffold learning for students, but only when evidence that their knowledge gaps is present and scaffolding is needed. So within the curriculum, PhD Science provides infinite opportunities for teachers to assess knowledge and next steps to help clear up misconceptions. And we did talk about some of these formative assessment tools throughout this presentation as well. But students should evaluate the questions students ask, as well as the individual models they create to explain the anchor phenomenon. Teachers can take note of any misconceptions or knowledge gaps, as well as ideas that students already grasp to guide learning throughout the module. So the PhD Science in Sync can also help teachers supplement content when misconceptions or knowledge gaps are identified as they're teaching through the new modules. We also want to quickly highlight some of the onboarding training that's going to be available as part of this offering. So there'll be an on-demand webinar that introduces the PhD TEKS Science Edition. There are also additional introductory there's also built-in supports to help teachers and leaders understand the materials, such as the module and topic overviews and the getting started guides that will be incorporated into the instructional materials. In addition, there will also be training guidance on how to deploy and use those materials in remote or hybrid settings. Additionally, we are also working to create some additional tools that will support the internalization and coaching tools needed to align specifically to the curriculum. So how can we create tools that allow teachers to internalize the different modules and the lessons, as well as how can we provide coaches tools to help provide coaching support that does align specifically to the PhD Science TEKS Edition product. We will also be working with education service centers to think about how they can support THL implementation. So you should be able to reach out to your service center as you think about implementing the product to obtain support. I also want to quickly highlight, again, when materials can be accessible and where to find upcoming webinars. So again, if you visit the texasHomeLearning.org website, this is where you can find information about the product specifically, as well as stay in the loop on upcoming events, webinars, and releases. It is also where this webinar recording will be posted after this session. Through this website, you also will be able to access all of the vendor-specific websites if you want to review materials for a particular subject area and grade band. As we look forward with Texas Home Learning, just a couple things to highlight in case it's interesting to folks on this call. We will have the Reading Language Arts 9 through 12 webinar to launch that product tomorrow. In addition, if you have been tracking with the math products that have been released, there will be a new 4-part series for the math Carnegie Learning product for 612 to help you get started if your district is planning to start to use those materials. So that's also something you can sign up for on the website. And again, we will be introducing a number of new webinars and new products as they're ready to be released. So you can keep your eye out for product overviews of additional products that will be coming soon. And again, just highlighting the release date for additional Module 1 material. So the rest of Module 1 materials additional Module 1 materials in addition to what Melissa was able to preview today. Those will be ready Friday, September 18th. So that concludes this webinar. We are going to pause again and look at some Q&A questions to see what we can answer based on what's been in the chat.
Just a couple things is that we will be releasing some pacing guides so people can see them. You can typically see that for a grade level, there's 3 to 4 modules per year, plus some selected topic lesson sets. That's to ensure that all standards are addressed throughout the year. I also want to mention that in 5th grade, an important part of this is that there is the grade banded content. So you might see references to 3rd or 4th grade content within 5th grade to help support students in mastery and address any unfinished learning prior to the end of your assessment. There is curriculum for each grade level. Just to be clear, there are some overlap that you'll see, especially in this first year, to address unfinished learning, and because science is grade banded for the STAR assessment, but each grade level has specific modules and lesson sets to address grade level content. Within there is opportunity for students to engage and act as scientists. So there is opportunity for investigations and for students. I know this is challenging in a remote learning environment. And so there are some recommendations on what kids can do at home, but also an opportunity for students to observe more of a demonstration as needed in some of the videos as well. We'll be releasing the NSYNC a little bit later this month.
We are getting a couple more questions just around the TRS and the THL alignment. Again, they are 2 different scopes of sequences. This will be true for all THL products, is that they're going to be different scope and sequences from the TRS products. A district can and should still choose which product that they want to adopt that works best for them. So they may continue to use the TRS product or they may choose to use the THL product. We just want to recommend that whatever they choose for a specific subject area and grade band, they follow with fidelity. If you are a district that already has started using the TRS scope and sequence, one of the things we will do is whenever we're recommending potential entry points for districts interested in transitioning to Texas home learning, we'll take into account what has been covered in TRS already. So it will be up to a district as to whether or not they want to transition to THL, and they should look at what's included in THL versus and compared to the needs of their teachers to determine if that transition is going to make sense for them. Another question we got is whether or not this will integrate in Schoology. All materials will be able to be accessed on Schoology. Your district, it will depend on if your district 1 creates a Schoology account and then 2 takes the steps to kind of prepare the materials and get them onboarded onto Schoology. But you will be able to access, districts that choose to do so will be able to access the materials on Schoology.
We did not get to everybody's questions today, but we will be releasing an FAQ to help respond to some more of the questions if we didn't respond. Please keep checking in with texasHomeLearning.org and look for the materials. We continue to release materials as they're reviewed and approved. Thank you for joining our webinar today. That concludes our information, and then we will be posting the recording as well as answers to some more of your questions. We appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day.